Neon Hari-ho,
Hari-he,
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 hari-ho,
Hari-yo-ya, kayo-no, de-wa-ne-yong-ge-yo-wi.
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
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 Hari,
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 hari-ho,
Hari-yo-ya, kayo-no-ne-wa-ne-yong-ge-yo-wi.
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Anung-kwa-sa-ni-oi-da-ge-de-yung-gwa-de-wen-ye.
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari,
hari-ho,
Hari-he,
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 hari-ho.
Good evening. Welcome to the Futures concert. And I'm so happy that I can introduce Sadie Buck. So Sadie, where are you joining us from?
Six Nations Reserve in Ontario.
Awesome. And so this was, a song written by you and sung by the Six Nations Women Singers. Who are the Six Nations Women Singers? When did you form this group?
Probably about 60 years ago. We've been singing together a long time.
That's awesome. And so what is your process for writing songs? Because obviously you write all the songs for the Six Nations Women Singers.
Well, no, I don't write all the songs. There's a couple of other women that write, and a couple of other people. My son writes sometimes, so there's a few other people that write, so I'm not the only one. But I'm usually the only one that does this kind of work, where there's something that's not the usual, like in a traditional song, that there's not that element usually isn't there for a traditional song. I mean, for when we do a traditional song, then anybody writes it and we can sing whatever. But when it comes to work, like say with this orchestra or with the choir or something like that, that's not a normal thing for traditional songs, then that's usually me. I'm usually the one that does that work.
Mm-hmm.
But I write in a lot of different ways. So.
No, you keep going. You write in a lot of different ways. Such as?
Yeah, I just write songs in like I always carry my recorder, because I'll be driving down the road and I'll start thinking of a melody, or I'll start thinking of a song. Usually the melody and the song are together, but when I'm I'm driving down the road, I record. If I don't have a recorder, then I just call my house and then I record it on my message machine. So, I mean, that was before. Now I usually have a recorder with me, but I just make them up. I just see something or think of something, and then I just start writing a song. Maybe not the melody and the vocable lyric lines first, and then once I get home, and then if I want to put lyric lines that have the language in it, then that's when I add them in, because songs that have language in it are much harder to do, and more complicated, so that they have to have time, like melodies and vocable lines and different structure of songs. I could do that anytime, anywhere, as long as I have a recorder. But so, or else another way that I do it is I will start singing a song and then I start changing it and changing it and changing it and changing it and adding elements and things like that. And then pretty soon I have a song, and then it's a song.
Yeah, well, and this song they told us has those vocable parts, has the language in it. Plus, we had that extra challenge of you trying to write a song and have your group learn it and record it during COVID. And we had a few phone calls about this. So can you talk a little bit about what the impact of the pandemic and protection measures have been, not just on this song, but on your on your practice, on the Six Nations women singers, kind of even big picture?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, I'm really lucky, like, as a lead singer, and I'm not the only lead singer. There's a couple others women that lead, but I'm the primary lead. I'm the one that usually leads. So I'm very lucky because we've been singing together for so long, like 60, 58, 60, 59 years, 60 years, somewhere in there. They're really good at what they do. So for me, I mean, it's fairly easy. Like if I make up a song, basically they just have to hear it one time and then they've learned it. For this song, so we're lucky that way. Even with COVID, we're lucky because they're very, very trained in being able to repeat a song right back. So they're really good at that. And so with COVID, there was no time to rehearse this song at all because of the restrictions for COVID with the social distancing. So we took a big, I don't know, chance or a big thing the day it was recorded is the day that they learned the song. So because they're so trained and so good at that, it didn't take a long for us to record it. I mean, obviously, if we would have had an actual rehearsal and learned the song prior to, we probably could have done a smoother job because it's a little rough, but it gets the point across. The song gets the point across, and in terms of our music, the function of our music is to get the point across. So it's a perfectly functioning song. So COVID really impacted it. Well, it sort of impacted on that part, was that the actual learning of the song. And I mean, now if we wanted to learn to sing this song outside of this recording, then we would have to go and learn it again and actually learn it to put it in our repertoire. And that's more on me as the lead, because they would be able to follow me. They would be able to follow me no matter what. So, excuse me. So in that way, COVID just kind of impacted, because we weren't supposed to be meeting together at that time. The reserve here was in Black, and so we did. But and so I was glad that they were willing to come over and do the song, because we just recorded it in my living room. So I was glad that they were willing to do that outside of the COVID restrictions that we were in, because that was the problem we were having, was that I was having when I originally wanted to record it, was that they some of them didn't want to come over because of the COVID, and we didn't know how to react to the COVID restrictions. Like, like, was all these old grandmas going to get thrown in jail for breaking the rules? So, nobody knew what to do or what to think about it. So finally we just said, if they throw us in jail, I guess they throw us in jail, COVID jail. So we just went ahead. I called them and said, do you want to record this on such and such a date? And they said, yeah, we'll be there. And they all showed up, and I sang, they followed, and off we went. So COVID had an impact, and it didn't have an impact, because we're used to singing. So that part, but just whether we wanted, it was more emotional whether people wanted to break the rules or not. Because, and because we had to seriously think about that. If we break the rules and somebody is positive, then we'd all be in trouble. But right. Everybody's willing to to break the rule and to do it, so it worked out.
Well, and and you all stayed healthy from that gathering. And I know another thing that we talked about is, like, you also sort of changed the song a few times because you weren't sure, as you were saying, like, who would actually record it. So you thought, okay, well, if there's a version that my family does, this is what it'll be like. But if it's a version that some of the Six Nations women singers come over, it'll be like this. So, you also were in this time of flux of, like, do I have to keep rewriting this song because I don't know who's going to perform it?
Well, yes. And for me, that's really, I'm lazy. I can write a song at the drop of a hat. So I don't have to, I don't want to, it was so getting complicated whether, who should I write this song to sing? Like, is it going to be my nephews, which are male voices, or is it going to be the Six Nations women singers? Or so do I write a song that mediates in the middle, so which is what I ended up doing, was changing the song just slightly so that it was in the middle and could be male or female voices instead of, blasting away with women's voices and then including my voice and lower male voices. So it was that part was a little bit frustrating, because I didn't know which route to go. And then once I did decide to go ahead and just write a little piece that kind of mediated in the middle, which I guess I should have just done from the beginning. But once I decided that, everything kind of just came together and started going, and even them deciding to come over and sing and stuff like that, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that you were, patient and persistent through this process and trying to, write a song, record a song during COVID, because now there's this beautiful song. And I certainly hope that Six Nations women singers, learns it and incorporates it into the repertoire. I think it's a beautiful song. So thank you again. We are going to move on now to the next. So thank you so much, Sadie, for stopping by this Q&A. I hope you enjoy the rest of the concert. It was so great to work with you over these last few months, and congratulations on the new piece just premiered. If you are coming late to the concert, make sure you go back and watch that later. So let's move on to the next piece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we now are joined by 3 members of that amazing saxophone quartet that you just heard. So maybe if the 3 of you just want to quickly introduce yourselves and which saxophone you're playing in this piece.
Sure. My name's Katie. I played the bari sax in the piece.
I'm Helena. I play alto sax.
I'm Will. I played the tenor part.
And we're missing Kyle, who played the soprano, and he's away for some family things right now.
Well, I mean, we're still really lucky that 3 of the 4 quartet members were able to join us for this chat. I want to start by talking with you, Katie, because I know you arranged this. This is not a piece that existed originally for saxophone quartet. It's a string quartet. So what was your reaction to Sivunittini the first time you heard it?
The very first time I heard it was Tanya Tagaq's version, and I am just amazed at what she can do with her voice. And then when the Kronos Quartet arranged it and seeing all the sounds that they could draw out of the string instruments was pretty entertaining. And I was like, maybe we could do something similar.
Obviously you did. And so obviously it requires a lot of extended technique, which is, you know, as far as I understand, happens a lot in saxophone repertoire, but maybe not to the extent as there is in this piece. But can you all talk a little bit about the kinds of extended techniques that you use in this piece, and also just that process of experimenting to figure out what would work, because there wasn't a saxophone quartet score to tell you what extended technique to do until, you know, Katie started working on this.
Do you want
to? Sure, I can say something about this. So in this piece, in my part, I had a lot of slap tonguing, which is like sort of where like your tongue hits the reed hard and it creates like sort of like a percussion type sound. So that was a different type of technique. You can kind of like experiment with like the different pitches and how you hit it and stuff like that. So
one of the techniques that I use frequently in the piece, especially for the bari sax, is like our growling technique, which I've always described as like making a Wookiee noise, like in the center of your throat and just like going throughout the pitches on the saxophone. And on the bari sax, it comes out very, very aggressively, and it fits some of the ideals behind the piece. And then you had some fun multiphonics.
Yeah. I was gonna say I had to do a lot with multiphonics for it, which pretty much you're playing multiple tones at the same time. They're not even notes. More often than not, they're really out of tune. So there was a lot of experimentation with different fingerings for that and like which ones will get the right sound. So that was something interesting. And the control.
Very cool. So what did you all think when this was brought to you as an idea to perform? What was your reaction?
I thought it was really different and unique. I don't know. I was excited by it. Maybe a little bit intimidated just because it's so different, but yeah, it was cool.
Oh, yeah. We had this kind of in planning for a while, so I'd known about it, but I really didn't expect for how wild it was really going to be and how difficult it was to put together. I actually put a fair amount of takes and time into it. It wasn't just thrown together, and I thought it would be a little bit more simple than it was, but it was no.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Katie. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Will and Kyle are part of the original quartet that I initially started working with, and then due to the pandemic and getting new saxophone majors, like our quartet had an instrumentation change, so it was a little bit tricky trying to bring Helena up to speed because we've been working on it back when I did the seminar with you, and initially we were trying to get it all put together before that project and wasn't able to at the time, and then the world fell apart, came back together, and we got a brand new saxophone. So that was like a little bit of like the trickier part.
Right, that's transitioning in a new person. Yeah, for sure. Is there anything? So, are there any specific parts that were surprisingly tricky that maybe you can clue us in on, so that when we listen to it again, we're like, oh yeah, that was the part that they said was really difficult. And then on the flip side, parts that were maybe easier to put together.
The very beginning proved to be a little more difficult than I would have thought, because the beginning we're all kind of just breathing into the saxophone, and when it all came together, I was a little bit amazed at how well it worked. But trying to make it more than just, oh, you have these four musicians literally breathing into their horn and getting like the warbles and the whines out, needed a little bit more control than I would have initially thought. As well with, there's a technique I wrote in where we bite the reed, and depending on which way your teeth are going, scraping up or down, creates that like inhale, exhale. The physical manipulation of that was a little bit more trickier than I would have thought. But
so is that like is that a pre-existing technique, this idea of like scraping the reed against your teeth, or was that something that you came up with?
I've never seen it in literature
I
yet.
have one piece, and that's it.
Yeah, I've never had to do that before until now.
When I was initially working on this for class, I kind of like personally discovered it when playing with making sounds on different parts of the saxophone. So like playing it just on the neck, on the mouthpiece, and things like that. And that's when I was just like scraping up is more like an inhale, really high pitched and squeaky. And I was like, oh, this works. I'm gonna keep that. So, but I have yet to come across it, but Will has. So,
yeah, once. Very cool. So, yeah, for those that maybe don't know much about this piece, so you can go check it out. The Kronos Quartet's 50 for the Future project. But So Tanya's kind of original score for it is her own vocalizations that were then arranged for string quartet. And I know, Katie, when we were initially talking about this piece, we were talking about the fact, well, vocalizations are being reimagined on a string quartet, and there's some things that really, like sounds that really work well that sort of match her voice. But then saxophones are an actual instrument that uses air, like a vocalist. So maybe there's some things about a saxophone quartet that's actually better matched. What did you find in terms of that, in terms of like getting much closer to Tanya's sound through the saxophones that maybe like a string instrument or another instrument family wouldn't quite get?
I think I would say closest thing is just the use of air, like, because we already have that to power the instrument. Like, we didn't have to go out of our way to use that for like sound design, or use it with pitch to get, or even like with like the multiphonics and the growls to power these techniques, like, because it's already there. Like, we didn't have to do anything like scraping the bow weird or like scratching on like the frog to get the air sound, because we're already wind musicians. So
yeah, you're already wind musicians. That's great. Well, congratulations again, first to you, Katie, for this, I'll say an enormous accomplishment to arrange this, put it in notation, and lead your quartet in learning this, and then of course your entire quartet in learning and performing this piece. I enjoyed it a lot. I do love myself a good saxophone quartet. And thank you also for taking the time, Helena, Katie, and Will, for chatting with me tonight. So you can wave your farewells, and we're going to move on to the next piece.
all right, well, thank you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome back to our live Q&A. This time we are just so lucky to have some of the amazing artists associated with the song we just heard, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So you go ahead.
I don't want to start.
I'll start. I'll go ahead and start in my language. Chukma, Chin Chukma Taha Tak, Saholchifo Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, Chikashasaya, Talo Ekbisaya, Hashlaka Sayopa, Chukmashki, Yakoke. Hello, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer, and I composed the last piece that you just heard. Britney.
Hello. Right. My name's Britney Yauger. I am a Thai American soprano, and I was so fortunate to sing this beautiful, glorious piece by Jerod. And I'm currently finishing up my master's at CMU.
How's it going? My name's Mobéy Lola Irizarry Lambright. I'm a composer, multi-instrumentalist, and multimedia artist. I'm also a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, currently living in Pittsburgh. I'm also Puerto Rican and descendant of Taino, Arawak, and Yoruba and Spanish peoples. Yeah, and I made the video art for this amazing piece.
Awesome, thank you. So Jerod, let's start with you. What are the origins of this song, and where is it going next?
Alexa, you are the origin of this song. You were the one that actually brought to my attention the White Snake Opera Project, and that's Cerise Jacobs who runs that, and they were looking for native composers for a call that they were doing for 8 composers for songs. And I mean, it seemed like the songs were kind of in the serious musical theater, like the Bernstein type, musical theater areas where they were going for it. That's what was my interpretation. But they're very much designate themselves as an activist opera company, and I called Cerise to tell her to turn it down because I'm not generally an outright activist in what I do, and that's just not my style. Not critical at all, but that's just not. I didn't feel like that my organic style was going to fit hers, and I was feeling a little self-conscious. And so in our conversation, she convinced me to do it, and I said, you know what? I think I've got an idea. So I pitched this whole idea. I said, how? Because they were talking about colonization and space and this kind of thing, and I said, I'm a total space nerd. So I'm actually very pro, let's go to Mars. One of my very good friends is John Harrington. He's a Chickasaw astronaut. And I call him all the time about space nerdy questions and stuff. So I've got this whole other life of space travel and stuff. And so anyway, and I said, how about this idea, an ironic idea of a young Chickasaw woman who is designated to be the first person to step foot on Mars? And just kind of the irony that goes with that, and maybe her feelings of what does this mean for her. And so I was thinking a little more on that universal message of what it means to embark on a path it's got complications and has uncertainties and lots of questions. And humans do that. Every human on the planet can relate to that feeling of uncertainty when they're moving forward on something. And so anyway, I really got into it. I wrote the piece within just days. It was just it just came to me very quickly. I was so grateful to have that conversation. And it's just so funny how things kind of turn. And then the next year they asked me to write another one. And I wrote one in conjunction with a Navajo gal in Tuba City about the COVID pandemic. And so anyway, I just built this relationship, and that was because Alexa, you were the one that sent me this way. And I had called to say no, but then it just really kind of pulled out some just songwriting in me that I didn't really realize was in there. And so I'm just really grateful for the whole circumstance. And I felt quite good. I felt good about how I was expressing it, what I was doing, and just kind of the culmination of my personal experience in musical theater and in art song. And so that's just what kind of came out. So.
Well, it's beautiful. I love this song, and I know that Britney, you also love it. So, what was your approach as a vocalist and bringing kind of your own expression as a performer to this song?
Well, there are some really tricky parts vocally, I'm not gonna lie. So my first and foremost, the high notes are no problem, but the kind of middle range F sharps, repeated F sharps, that's tricky. So it was first about kind of like vocally navigating that and finding a sound that was not too like Western classical and not too modern. And so that was vocally my approach. But I also really related to the uncertainty and the apprehension of the, and like starting new, going somewhere new. As my family is a family of immigrants, and like obviously colonization is like a different topic entirely, but as far as this character who's kind of stepping into something new and uncertain, I really related to that. So yeah, I was able to relate to that expressively.
Well, you sound beautiful on it, so congratulations. And then, Mobéy, I said, hey, what would you think about creating some video art? Because I just thought the story lent itself to imaginings in various media. So where did you get your ideas, and how, tell us a little bit about how you got your idea and your creative process with this.
Yeah, for sure. So my in as far as making films goes is making films that accompany my music. So this is actually my first time making any kind of video to somebody else's music. And I felt really excited to be able to do it for Jerod's music, who like for a long time I've admired your work. So I feel like I learned a lot as like, even as just a musician, interacting in that, on that level. But for me, the concept is just like the view from the spaceship, and kind of the like projection of emotions and memories and histories onto what Mars might look like as you're approaching on a spaceship, and what the Earth looks like as you're leaving it. In the first conversation me and Jerod had about the piece, I mentioned like wanting to incorporate oil drillers, like drilling on Mars. And we had this conversation about how this piece is kind of situated within an abstract future, and that like Jerod really pushed me to like go outside of like something that's like very tied to a specific time period, and like really think about I guess, I mean, how I took that feedback was I began to really think about like what are more universal experiences across generations of like what it means to be a colonized person or like descendant of colonized people. And I think what I came to in part was that there's an alienation that comes from the violent erasure of our ancestral knowledges and histories and cultures, and that at times there's this sense that somewhere along the line, many of our ancestors' worlds were torn apart and put back together. So that there's a part where there's like a vague like Earth-like sphere that, I mean, it's Earth-like only in that there's green and blue in the sphere, but it gets torn apart and then like put back together. And to me, I kind of like use that as like a representation of like memories of what colonization has been ancestrally, and then like that turns red, and then suddenly we're looking back at Mars. But so yeah, try to represent that in shapes and colors and movements that I programmed. But it was a big challenge for me because I'm really used to representing things literally, and I felt like what I had to represent wasn't something that could be represented literally. But yeah, it was quite a challenge, but a fun process.
Thank you. Well, now, I mean, I loved the video art, in the first place, but now having a little bit more of this explanation, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to rewatch that and kind of
That's really
understand
moving to
things.
hear
Yeah.
that, because it's like, so many, I mean, I think all of us experience a deconstruction and a reconstruction in all kinds of phases in our lives. And, when we think about our own ancestors, I think there's, everybody on the planet feels that same process that they go through, and in different stages in your life and everything. So that's really a beautiful way to articulate that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I do also want to make sure that we shout out to the pianist and the cellist who also came together to make this whole thing happen. So that Bank on piano and
Yay.
Steve on the cello. I mean, it really, this performance required the coming together of so many artists, and I appreciate so much the time that you have given, the three of you, to come and share a little bit about your contribution to this performance. Obviously, Jerod, we need a composer in the first place, so thank you. But you could compose a piece, and if no one performs it, then it doesn't really have a life. So thank you to everyone else for bringing Jerod's piece to life and for joining us in this brief conversation. Thank you for taking the time. If you want to just say farewell to our audience, and we're going to move on to the last piece of the program.
Thank you. Enjoy.
All right, y'all have a great night.
Bye.
Night.
Hello and welcome back to our last Q&A portion for this concert, because that was our last piece on the concert, and I hope that you all could hear the connection to the opening piece on the concert. That was Trio on Themes by Sadie Buck, composed by Melody McKiver, who has graciously joined us. And we also have here Daniel Nesta Curtis, who conducted the piece and just guided the musicians through the rehearsal and performance of this piece. So thank you to you both. Melody, I want to ask you first, when you're dealing with, pre-existing material, so you've got Sadie Buck's song, but I know it could be in other situations too. How do you balance honoring that original material with your own compositional voice?
I find for a lot of this work that I've been doing with, I guess, spoken word and other traditional Indigenous songs, I usually start off with a transcription just so I can I think as much as getting it on page, it's also just a really intimate process for me to spend the time really getting familiar with the material and listening over and over again and trying to capture those nuances in notation, which is always kind of a tricky process and compromise because we're dealing with different systems of tonality and texture and timbre that aren't always reflected in Western notation. And after that, then it's, for me, it was a process with this arrangement of deciding what instrumentation I would like for a small ensemble to kind of capture. What I really want to do is kind of capture the mood of Sadie Buck, but also make it something that's perhaps a little bit more idiomatic for the instrumentation. So I find many composers' approaches working with Indigenous song have been to kind of like stick with this really like strict pentatonic thing, but then it doesn't translate well because they're two different musical vocabularies. So I think a lot of my approaches just try to expand the harmonic language a bit in a way that's still honoring the source material, but making it something to kind of translate it into the new instrumentation.
Yeah, and I think one of the main ways that, at least in my hearing, that you did that was through writing for vibes, which is one of my favorite parts of this piece, is the vibraphone part. And Daniel, I know you really like that that part too. So how did you settle on vibes as sort of offering a little bit more of that, of the harmonic language that you were looking for? Because I think it just sounds so beautiful in this piece.
Yeah, I think it was something where, for one, in terms of making, keeping that, the shaker sound, which is so integral to Haudenosaunee song, especially as part of that. I mean, often like the best person equipped to be multitasking with a shaker is going to be a percussionist. So that was one, and I was also thinking where like I really enjoy the repertoire of just kind of like the classic piano trio, violin, cello, piano, and then I kept one of the three instruments and decided to go for viola 1 and violin 2. But I was kind of thinking through that sort of chamber music format too, but really want to strip it down because I think I kind of like that sort of suspended timbre. I mean, I really love the sound of things like the Fender Rhodes as well, and a lot of like more electric instrumentation. So I think the vibes is a nice translation there, and I thought I just didn't want to write a conventional piano trio, so it became a vibraphone trio.
As a pianist, I'm like not offended at all. I think it sounds way better this way. And of course you had to put the viola in because if people don't know, Melody plays viola, plays some awesome stuff on viola. So, you know, we got to make sure that instrument gets plenty of love. Now, Daniel, when well, I mean, you can reflect on anything you want. Me bringing this idea to you, you encountering the score for the first time, you leading rehearsals. I mean, what kind of stands out to you about your relationship with this piece?
Sure. Yeah, it was a really, really special kind of project because we had this beautiful score, and thank you, Melody, for creating this. So we had this document to work with, but we also had Sadie's recording and the recording of the Six Nation women singers. So listening to that recording was a big part of our process in preparing to work on the piece together. First, initially on our own, just in sort of digesting the material. And then hearing Sadie talk about the process of rehearsing and recording with the Six Nation singers felt very familiar because we were also, due to pandemic restrictions, being in a room together is such a privilege. And so we met, we rehearsed for about an hour and a half, took a little break, came back, listened to the recording again, actually before we recorded each of the movements, Melody, that you wrote. We listened to that specific part of Sadie's piece. But from rehearsal to recording was all done in one glorious afternoon.
Yeah, I remember sitting in on the rehearsal. Well, sitting in, I was over Zoom. They were physically in a room. And Daniel having to be like, oh, it's been enough time. We have to like leave the room and air out the room because that's what it means right now for us to be able to rehearse safely, is like to physically leave this room and stop breathing in it. So yeah, I appreciate you and the student musicians, you know, being so patient, you know, with what we're trying to do in order to be safe, but also be, have music and make music together. Melody, what, so you talk a little bit about, trying in the notation to like capture some things in the original song, but also just accepting this is a different thing. In terms of trying to get at like Sadie's vocal timbre, what were some of your strategies there? And slash, like, where did you say, well, I'm just like never gonna get there, so this is what I'm gonna do?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm obviously a very pro viola bias in my instrumentation, but definitely a kind of a conventional orchestration is going to put violin as the lead instrument, and just where everything is sitting in Sadie's range, like it could have been played in violin range as well. But it's just I think I kind of wanted that extra space for the sound to come out of that viola timbre, which I think can serve kind of like these notions of vocal transcriptions really well and add that extra kind of resonance and richness to it. And then it was just kind of more fun for me to play around with as well. And certainly, as I also mentioned earlier, in just instrumentation, I also have a background in classical percussion, so with a very short turnaround time that we had for writing this, it's definitely facilitates my process as a composer to be writing for instruments that I'm quite intimate with already and have a familiarity with.
Yeah. Daniel, just in terms of, so Melody sort of hearing in the viola kind of the best match to Sadie's voice, and viola is not generally used to being the lead, especially when there's a violin in the room. So, can you talk a little bit about that, kind of drawing that out of the violist to be like, no, you are the leader. It's
yes,
okay.
Violists are not used to being in that position necessarily, but when given the chance, they're so appreciative, and I know Elisa was. And especially because of how conversational the music is, and especially between the violin and the viola part. As you mentioned, the normal paradigm would be the violin does the calling or proclaiming, and maybe the viola is the responder. So to flip that on its head was excellent in and of itself. And then I think of the viola, maybe along with the English horn, as being one of the instruments that can sound most like the human voice expressively, and so up in those higher positions, particularly in the second movement, the middle part of the piece, the vocalese fantasia. There were parts of it where we really listened to Sadie singing a particular line, and Elisa worked on really mimicking that timbre and finding a way to match the color and gesture as much as she could. And one thing that was really helpful to us in working on this was a message melody that actually got passed to us through Alexa. But I think in a conversation about the piece, you said, maybe tell the musicians to think Bartók and less Mozart. And we talked about that, and it was the perfect kind of inspiration to say, okay, now we sort of know the inflection and how to think about adapting the material for those instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's so successful in the end. I mean, I think it's just such a beautiful piece, and I know, Melody, you were handed, kind of a tricky task. As I discussed with Sadie, COVID kind of disrupted things. There was a lot of needing to adapt over time, revisit, have chats, try again. But in the end, I mean, there's this beautiful orchestration of Sadie's song, and the student performers did such an amazing job. And so, thank you, of course, to those three, and to your leadership, Daniel, in helping them get there. And thank you also so much for joining us for this little brief chat tonight. Thank you for taking the time. We are going to end the concert right here, but I do want to give a couple last shout outs, of course, again, to both Sadie Buck and Melody McKiver. I wanted to commission new material for this festival, and you both were willing to say yes. So thank you for that. all the performers and artists. Of course, Daniel, you were supportive of this idea right from the start, and it also changed from our first conversation. But you were always so supportive, and of course for taking the leadership on this trio of themes. Michael Bridges for making that last piece happen. The Center for Arts and Society, Bill Rogers for making all of this happen through the support of the Studio for Creative Inquiry. And thank you to everyone who has attended the concert tonight. And for those of you who will watch at a later date, please enjoy. This music is amazing, and have a good evening.